spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of Man Eater May. I guess this is what it is. We're the Scaryish podcast. I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
We talk about weird stuff. This episode is going to be weird.
Woo! I don't know where to put that with Robin's new intro.
You know what? It's 4:05 a.m. when we're recording this, so we're just like,
groggy. We're tired.
Yeah, we're tired.
We had a very busy weekend.
My throat hurts, so if I'm like, that's why.
Now you know. We had a very busy weekend. We were out in California for an event that Robin was attending as an artiste. It was very fun. Nefcor from our audience came and saw us. It was wonderful to meet a spooky friend in person. It's always such an exciting thing. So shout out to you, Nefcor, for traveling and saying hi to us. And it was a very, very positive experience. We got back today into the Las Vegas area around 7 p.m. We ate dinner, and then we got back on the grind and started preparing our scripts. I will say, I think this is my third longest script.
This is
ever.
My longest script.
It's Robin's longest script. And we're starting this episode the latest we've ever recorded.
And you know what? There's so much stuff that gets cut out of these topics, too, because it's just...
There's so much
to cover. And I wish we had more time. It's like this could be my topic at least could be an entire episode just by itself.
Like without me even talking.
Without you even talking.
I just press record and step out of the room.
Yeah.
Mine could too, 100%. I guarantee you it's going to be a long episode, or at least longer than the normal episode. We shall see. But I am going to be going first. And this week, like we alluded to last week, we are wrapping up Man Eater May with not dueling stories as I have written here in my script. It's similarly themed stories.
Why did you write dueling if it's not dueling?
Well, I just corrected it because I don't know why I wrote dueling. It's probably because I'm tired. I don't know how much they're actually going to duel. They're definitely similar, so it'll be like this nice theme. I'm excited to wrap up with this like impromptu themed month because it wasn't something we planned. It was definitely something that was...
it's all inspired by you.
Absolutely. It was organic in the way it came about, and it was super fun. So let's just jump into the first topic of the episode. So for the fourth week in a row, I will be covering a creature whose man-eating exploits were so famous, they were documented in a movie. And so far this month, I have covered the true story behind Jaws, The Ghost in the Darkness, and Primeval. And with this topic, I will be covering the critically acclaimed independent film by Trey Parker and Matt Stone known as Cannibal the Musical. If you've seen it, this means you know I'll be covering the man-eater known as Alfred Packer, the Colorado Cannibal. That's right, spooky friends. We're wrapping up Man-Eater May with an episode about cannibals, which means you can probably guess what Robin's topic is going to be if I'm covering this particular one. I'm
going to be covering the Donner Party, which is, more cannibalism.
So if you're triggered by cannibalism, this may not be your episode.
Well, hopefully we'll have the title of the episode like "Be Cannibals" or something.
We'll figure it out.
I don't know.
Either way, I will say this though: most of what I'm about to cover is true crime related, and then near the end you discover like, oh, and also he ate people. So it is actually very fascinating. I was loving everything as I was researching, and I was having a very good time, so it is a very long script. Getting back to Alfred Packer for a second, or for 7 pages, for those of you who aren't aware of the movie based on him, it was written by the guys who make South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. It's a musical and a comedy, and it is very independent in the fact that they made it when they were still like just fresh out of college and they didn't have money. I think it was like 4 years before South Park, in fact. So if you ever want to check it out, turn the director's commentary on. It's hilarious to watch it with them talking about the movie at the same time. One thing I learned while doing the research is that, not shockingly, Cannibal the Musical isn't very accurate at all. So if you've seen it, give yourself 50 cool points because that movie is hilarious and obscure. Just know that the events are nothing like the musical. So this topic is about the main character, though, from Cannibal the Musical, Alfred Grinner Packer. His name is spelled Alferd. So it's almost like his parents messed up on his birth certificate and his name should have been Alfred, but it's Alferd.
My sister's name is Elizabeth, and my mom likes to say my mom wanted to write a little butt, but she put
a little butt.
Yeah. I like that joke. I think
that's a good
it's
joke.
Cute.
Anyways, As a Bears fan, I will say it's not shocking that something so terrible is associated with the name Packer. That's a football joke for those of you who watch football, which is probably not a lot of you out there. I had to toss that in there, though. When it comes to Alfred Packer as a topic, there's something I want to mention, and I really do think that this also applies to Robin's topic, as she kind of spoke about earlier. There is a ton of information on him, on my particular person, and guaranteed on the Donner Party. And I've mentioned before that we have topics sometimes where I'm not sure there's going to be enough to cover a full episode. I get a little nervous. Alfred is the other type. There's so much that there's basically no way I could cover all of it.
Yeah, and same goes for me. There's some topics that it's just detail after detail after detail, and it's really hard to include every single little detail in these stories.
Right. So when you get to stories like that, what I do, and I think it's what Robin does as well, is I read through the story, I check for accuracies or inaccuracies, and then I essentially give you folks the highlights of the stuff that I found interesting, that I think forms the core of the narrative. And if there's any jokes that I want to toss in there, I include those details too. So if you're one of the pinky up, actually, folks, we don't need to hear about the stuff we left out. Just stuff it, okay? We're telling you right now, we deliberately left out stuff. Like, I did 3 episodes, 40 pages of research on Charles Manson, read a bunch of books, papers, watched movies. I still had jagoffs message me like, you really should have read this book. You shouldn't have said anything until you read this one. So don't do that. I don't want to hear it.
I like that you're calling these people jagoffs.
One of the messages I got was so up their own ass, like, oh, you should probably just read this book and then try talking. And it's just like, you probably should try listening to the episode and hearing all the other sources outside of like the one piece of literature you've read on this topic.
Or how about you trying? Doing a podcast is hard.
So let's just go ahead and jump in here. So Alfred Packer was born on January 21st, 1842. No, I'm not going to do y'all remember 1842 because there's too much in this topic.
No one remembers 1842.
He was born in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. He had 2 siblings, and both of his parents were in his life. He didn't have like a parent that ran away or someone that passed away. His family was intact while he grew up. His parents relocated from Pennsylvania to LaGrange, Indiana, which is northeast Indiana. It's actually several counties over from where I grew up. It's fairly close, in fact. They relocated there when he was in his young teens, and he wound up working as a cabinet maker while living in Indiana. He also did not get along with his parents. Not getting along with people is certainly a theme for this particular topic. It wasn't long before he just threw up the deuces and left. He actually left when he was still a teenager, I think like 18 or 19. He relocated to Minnesota. If you think about him relocating in the 1850s, when he did, that's really, really far. Like, I think it's an 11-hour drive between a lot of the places that I technically used to go to in Minnesota and where I grew up. So 11 hours driving. Imagine doing that where there's no cars. There's kind of like no roads. There's just trails. You're either taking a horse or a cart. And he relocates his entire life to Minnesota. So when he arrives, he decides that he's going to be a cobbler and not a cabinet maker. Like, how different can shoes be than cabinets, right? No big deal. And at this point, you might be thinking, is this really hitting up the highlights? Are his original professions relevant? Get to the eating. Yes, it is relevant. It shows that back in 1850s, you could just start a new career or business with 0 experience. When the 1860s hit, he joined the army to fight in the Civil War. He was on the Union side. He's only in the army for 8 months before he's discharged because he has seizures. He has epilepsy. So he's having seizures while they're trying to fight. They realize he's more of a liability than he is an asset. They discharge him. He goes and re-enlists in a different part of the country because he essentially joins in Minnesota, gets sent to the front lines. They take him back to a military hospital, discharge him in that city. He goes to a few cities over. He re-enlists. He's in for another 10 months until he is again discharged. And these are honorable discharges, by the way, for epilepsy because his seizures start acting up again. It's really bad. They give him a medical discharge again. They tell him, stop re-enlisting. You're going to get someone killed. He's like the people-eating version of Steve Rogers.
The people-eating version?
So this is basically an alternate universe version of Captain America. So after he's discharged for the second time in Cleveland, Tennessee, I didn't realize Tennessee also had a Cleveland, he just sort of feels lost. He can't fight for his country. He can't fight for what he believes in. And all the horrible things aside from what he's about to do, he was very anti-slavery and he wanted to fight, and he probably wanted to die over it because he's a pretty miserable human being. But now that he's like alive and he's not going to be able to be part of the war, he decides that he's going to travel west. And you can kind of just do this thing back in the day where you say, I'm going to travel west because there's a gold rush happening right now, and I'll eventually find something and strike it rich. So he keeps moving west for 9 years. And that's a long time to be basically moving. It's the 1860s at the time, so it's not like he can just hop in his car and head that way. Like, he just sort of has to keep heading west. And along his travels, he picks up quite a few jobs to make money. He's a hunter. He's a wagon teamster, so he works on a wagon. He's a ranch hand. He's a field worker. And the further west he gets, he is a miner. Basically, whatever work he can get while he's traveling across the country. He was not able... Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's funny that you're talking about Teamsters, because I had never heard of that before, but my topic also takes place in, like, the same time period, and so wagons and Teamsters are, like, they keep bringing them up, and I had to look it up. I was like, what the F is a Teamster?
My topic takes place, spoilers, after Robin's chronologically, and I'll eventually reference her topic because everyone had heard of it. But so he's moving west. He has all these jobs. He can't hold one down for 2 reasons. One is that he does continue to have seizures due to his epilepsy.
2, he eats people.
It's not like people didn't know what seizures were, and they didn't all just terminate his employment because of this, but he was more often than not fired for the second reason, which is he is an asshole. Folks that spoke of Alfred did not speak well. He's rude, he's abrasive, he's not good at his jobs, he starts fights, he did not play well with others. So he keeps taking these jobs and he keeps getting fired, so he continues to head west. Some of the jobs he was taking were on ranches and things like that, where had it worked out, he might have settled there, you know?
Yeah.
But he gets thrown out, so he just keeps going west. Some of the jobs he gets when he stops are mining jobs, like I mentioned, and because of that, he's slowly making his way into this career that he thinks is going to make him money. So he winds up in Colorado. He's in this new state, and he's willing to pretend he's qualified to do stuff, so what could go wrong, right? Well, as it turns out, a lot. And that one thing I kind of related to from my professional career is there's so many people I've come across that just lie about their qualifications or pretend they're good at something rather than just learning it. And they're also harsh and abrasive and don't play well with others to mask the fact that they're insecure, that they suck at their job or at just life in general. So one of his first jobs in Colorado is as a miner. His coworkers there are not fans of his, not surprisingly. Some of the things that were said about him is that he liked to steal things from other employees, he picked fights, and he seemed to be, using a contemporary term to describe him, a pathological liar. He would always just constantly make stuff up that you could tell he was just saying to make himself look better, or sort of adjust his reality so that he felt better about himself. And he got so sick of the fact that all these miners were not his friends, they did not like him, he was getting pushed out of different mines and trying to find other jobs, he decides he's going to keep heading west. So he leaves Colorado and he heads to Utah. He crosses over into Utah territory and is looking for a new place to call home until he burns all the bridges there, most likely. But on his travels, he encounters a party of people heading in the opposite direction. There's this funny movie called Wagons East. It's one of John Candy's final movies, where they have a caravan that they're leading east because all these people that have moved out west for the gold rush decide the west sucks and they want to go home. And that's the premise, is everyone's heading east in this caravan while the entire country is heading west for the gold rush.
Okay.
That's sort of what happens in this moment as Alfred is heading west. He encounters a party of around 20 people that are heading east, which is very odd. So at this point, as they're crossing, it's like that scene in the movies that we watch where someone's like, I bet you're wondering how I got here. Like, we're going to say that that's what's happening right now, but it's for the party of 20 men. They had actually been in Bingham Canyon in the mines. They're all miners, and they're working in essentially the destination that Alfred is going to.
You know, they actually did have miners working in the mines.
They were miners.
It's true.
Well, I got to scratch the joke for my script now. Thanks. Not really. I didn't put it on there because I figured you'd make fun of me for it, and instead you stole the joke. So they had left from Bingham Canyon, from the mines. They had heard there was a gold strike at Breckenridge, Colorado, in the mines of the San Juan Mountains. They were mostly miners who did not know each other. Essentially, this just sort of came up. Some of them decided, hey, I'm going to leave this mine. This seems pretty tapped out. We're going to go to this new gold mine and see if we can make our fortune there. And the only thing that these folks really had in common was they packed all their stuff up and they decided, let's head out together. Their strength in numbers. So they left in November of 1873. 20 of them heading east towards Colorado.
And this isn't like the same thing as the Great Depression type thing where everybody's going to find jobs, right?
No. They're chasing gold. They want a fortune. Like
Okay.
the same reason the gold rush happened. That's why these people are bouncing from town to town. And in Alfred's case, he wanted to do that, but like no one likes him and he has to keep moving on. It's not like they're picking on him. He sounds like he's a really horrible human being. By the end of this, you will agree. If you don't, that's kind of weird, by the way. You're probably Army Hammer if you don't. Anyways.
Oh my God.
None of them took a shot at Army Hammer. I don't think he listens to our show. Apparently he's like a cannibal enthusiast. It's really weird. None of these miners had actually been to the San Juan Mountains or Breckenridge, Colorado before. So now if you snap back to the present, in quotes,
to reality,
to this fortuitous meeting, Alfred Packer's heading west. This party is heading east. They stop. He addresses them. One of the folks that were in the party said that they met around 25 miles from where they had started, which is an area around Provo, Utah today. Packer asks the party, Alfred Packer asks the party, where are you guys heading? And they tell him. And he responds after he considers this for a little while with, I would like to go with you. So they look him up and down, and he doesn't have supplies for the journey in the direction they're heading. He doesn't seem to have supplies for the journey he's on. He doesn't have very good condition of anything. He doesn't have supplies for mining, so they're not sure how he's going to mine once he gets there. And he doesn't have any money for anything. According to him, he's completely broke. They state that they don't think it's a good idea for him to come with based off of these reasons. So he lets them know that they don't need to worry about all those things that are very obviously true. He's not just a miner, he's a prospector. He doesn't just mine gold, he finds gold.
Oh, okay. I was about to ask you what the difference is.
Also, he's a guide. He's a wilderness guide, and he's been all over the San Juan territory. Quick side note, all these things that he's telling them now are total bullshit. But apparently he rolls a really high bluff check, and they decide he can come along. One thing of note from some of these folks that he doesn't have a rifle with him, but he does have a Colt revolver on his person. So they feel like he's not that big of a threat because a lot of them are carrying rifles, and they feel like they'll be able to deal with him if they have to. So Alfred is on his way with these folks under the guise of being a guide. And you kind of hope Alfred at this point has something that like good happens to him, or it just like he stumbles into a good life, but he really doesn't. Almost immediately members of the party suspect he's lied about his resume because at night when they go to make camp, they realize he's not experienced with choosing a site properly, which means he's probably not a guide. And he's also not recognizing the terrain that they're on, even though he's supposedly very familiar with it. So there's a lot of red flags. On top of that, when they go to settle down to eat, he eats from their rations, not anything that he has with him. And he takes more than is allotted for a single person each night he's with them.
Wow.
So he's just like that asshole guest. You just don't want him there. After a few nights and tensions rising, Alfred is stricken with seizures. And the party has to help him during his epileptic episode. So I'm sure at this point they feel like they've been manipulated and lied to, but now they're somehow oddly responsible for this mess of a human being because he has this thing that's wrong with them, and maybe that's why he like wanted to glom onto the thing that they were doing, you know? Doesn't change the fact that when he's not seizing, his attitude is awful and he's a piece of crap.
Okay.
He starts fighting with members of the party, literal fist fights, picking fights. Others tell him, like, as they start asking him questions about who he is and what he's capable of doing, that he's, quote, a whining fraud. If this wasn't enough, the winter shows up with a fury. It is bad weather, lots of wind, deep, deep cold, lots of snow beyond what they normally get in this particular area. It is not what they were expecting to go through when they were making this trip. On top of that, They didn't know where they were going. They just figured they'd figure it out. And now this guy says he's the guide, and he's pretending to lead them, and he has no idea where he's going. So this really slows their progress, because having someone who's a liar leading you means you're not going to get where you want to go. The path that they were following eventually vanishes under the snow, and the treacherous terrain is completely hidden with this blanket of snow, so it makes their travel very slow so they don't injure their horses or themselves. It's stated that once they realize Alfred was a fraud, the only thing they have to guide the entire party through this winter pass during these storms is a compass. It is not Alfred, it's just a compass. So things are looking very bad. They are now out of rations at this point, and they are unable to hunt or capture anything. It's like Alone. If you've ever watched the TV show Alone, except it should be called Together, because they're all together, but they're equally boned. So one of the things they still had plenty of at this time was horse feed. The party decided it made the most sense for them to carefully ration out the horse feed between the men, and the horses weren't going to eat. So the horses are continuing to carry the men are eating the horses' food. This is a real dick move.
Yeah.
The plan is no longer, we'll do this and get to our destination. It's, we'll keep wandering forward, hoping that we're close, even though we're not. The only foresight that they have at this point is stating, we're going to eat the horse feed so that the horses starve first. And once the horses start to die,
then you can eat them.
We can eat the horses. And don't you always wish when you hear stories like this that something's going to come along out of nowhere and just save everyone? Like, I know we have the Donner Party coming up, but I always wish that. Well, here's something for everyone like me. On January 21st, 1874, the party is wandering through the snow, and they come upon a man who introduces himself as, and I think I'm saying this right, as Chief Ure. He was a chief of one of the bands of the Ute tribe. They had wandered into his encampment, and he sort of went out to greet them. They were really hesitant and really, really scared because they see this Native American. They realize they're technically like in his territory. So they have to have their little meeting to decide whether or not they're actually going to go and talk. After the party was afraid to approach, they decide we should probably just go talk. And when they decide to risk it, they enter the camp. And when they speak to the chief, they are welcome as guests. They are given food to fill their stomachs. They get beds by fires to take the chill out of their bones. And the chief says to them, yo dogs, why in the heck are you wandering around in this awful weather? So they explain to him why they're doing this. They're going to get money, basically. And the chief says to them, like, ooh, like, that's not smart. You all should stay here. We'll feed you and make sure you're kept warm until spring comes. Once spring is here, you guys can continue on your journey. So they do. The end. JK, LOL. It would be nice if they did, but that is not the end. They do stay. So they get there on January, I think it's the 21st. By the time February rolls around, the group of men have decided they need to have a conference again where they can discuss what's on the mind of the morons of the party. So the way it goes down is about half the party says, we need to leave. We'll ask for a bunch of stuff from this chief and he'll give it to us. And then we're going to leave because the gold rush has everyone heading out west from the east, which means anyone coming from the east is going to get there before us. And if they do, we're going to miss out on all the gold. So you can imagine how the conversation would go if it were you in it. Because I would absolutely, if this was coming up, say, I'm staying. I'm not going to go out into the winter that almost killed us. And most importantly, I'm not going to ask for more from this person. I'm going to do whatever I can to pay him back for saving my damn life.
Okay.
So, like I mentioned, 20 men originally had left Utah, and of these 20, 10 decide they're staying. They're staying at the encampment. Exactly half. The party cuts in half for what they're going to do. The other 10 are going to leave, try and brave the winter, and make it there. So the chief hears what's going on, tries to talk them out of it, and says, like, this is a really bad decision. You should stay here until the winter is over. In case you didn't notice, when you were sleeping here and staying warm and eating all our food, the storm's only gotten worse. So since they've arrived, the storm hasn't even stopped. But they're convinced, like, since we're okay now, since we're not starving anymore, since the horses didn't die, let's just go back out. We'll ask this guy to give us a bunch of food, and then we'll go, and I'm sure we're going to make it now.
Sounds like a bad idea.
So after he tries to talk these folks into staying, he realizes it's a waste of time, or they just said, like, look, we're all greedy idiots, and we're going to be leaving. So the chief is like, all right, well, since you're leaving, here's some stuff for you. And he gives them exact directions on how to get where they're going. He gives them a spot between where they're going and where they are so they can stop and rest one more time. And he gives them a path to take where they get to bypass the mountain so they can avoid the worst of the storm. And he tells them, like, stop off at this other spot. It's called Los Pinos Indian Agency first. It's a nearby outpost. You can recoup there again, get more provisions, then head to Breckenridge. All this stuff, directions, a map, tons of food, provisions so that they'll be okay, and then wishes them the best of luck. So once they have that, they decide they're going to take off with all this stuff. The other 10 that are staying are like, goodbye, see you later, you're probably going to die. So once we're here to this point, I must remind you, we started with 20 from Utah, but they picked one up on the way. So there was technically 21, and the 21st person is Alfred. Alfred decides he's leaving too. He needs to get rich. Also, he's obviously a moron, so that's the decision he's going to make. So these 11 get together. They decide they're going to plan out how they're going to get there. And while they're planning it out, Alfred stands up and says, we shouldn't take the chief's directions. The best way is over the mountain. It's the fastest. We'll get there the fastest. We'll make the most money. So then this group of 11 people argue. And of the 10 original folks from Utah, 5 of them say, you're an idiot. We're not going with you. The other 5 say, well, you're right. We need to get there as fast as possible. We'll listen to Dingleberry McCringleberry because all we want is money. So the people that are leaving split into a group of 6 and a group of 5.
Those are very small groups.
They are very small groups, especially but traversing through like one of the worst winters that they've seen. So Alfred Packer and his band of not so merry morons head off. He has the following folks with him: Shannon Wilson Bell, James Humphrey, Frank Butcher Miller, George California Noon, and Israel Swan. And they are on their way. The sky is blue and all the leaves are green. The sun is as warm as a baked potato. I think
What?
You know precisely what I mean when I say it's a spadoinkle day.
What the
That's
F
the
are
song
you-
that Alfred Packer sings in Cannibal the Musical.
Oh my lord.
When they set off, and it's glorious, and you should go listen to it when this is over. So they would leave on February 9th. The two parties initially traveled together for a time before Alfred basically says, all right, we're going over the mountain. When they head over the mountain, they're expecting it to take 14 days to get to where they're going. They only take 14 days worth of food, showing they do not have a lot of sense because Alfred sucks. They also have no snowshoes in which to traverse the mountain, only a few matches between all 6 people to light anything. No winter clothes to keep the deep cold off of them. Only 2 rifles, 1 pistol, which is Alfred's, 2 knives, 1 hatchet, and only a handful of bullets for each weapon. Also, for any alone enthusiast out there, it's stated that none of them had a flint. So they weren't going to be able to make fires very well or consistently.
Did that
for
exist
that matter.
back then?
Yes, flint did exist. None of the men are seen from after they leave on February 9th until April 16th. That is 2.5 months in the cold. So the Los Pinos Indian Agency is serving breakfast to those that are present. This is the place that most of them had been going to as their waypoint before they went on to Breckenridge. While all the folks are sitting there eating, the doors burst open and through it walks one man. He states that he needs food and shelter, and he looks pretty messed up. He's frostbitten. He's carrying a rifle, a knife, a coffee pot, because you got to have your priorities straight.
Is he really?
And he has rags wrapped around his feet to keep them from getting frostbitten to the point where he's going to have to cut them off, basically. That man is, of course, Alfred Packer. He has no one else with him. They give him food, and as he's eating, he vomits up what he's eating. When they ask him if he's okay, because they've never seen someone behave as he is, despite the fact that he's supposedly starving, he tells them that he's sick as a result of the weather, and because he's starving, his digestion has changed, whatever that means. They ask him what happened. He states that once they left and went up the mountain, he had become snowblind, and his group gave him a rifle and told him, we're leaving you here, you're dragging us down, and they abandoned him. And he had to make his way all the way to this place by himself. When he's asked, what did you eat? He tells them, I've only eaten roots and rosebuds for the last 2.5 months. They then mention, you don't look like you're starving. He's actually in fairly good condition for someone that arrived. He's kind of plump, in fact. So he was gone in the wilderness for 2 months. He shows up. No one's there. He has a rifle, which was not his, which no one knows yet. And things just seem odd. He states that the rifle he was given once he was abandoned by his party didn't even work. And he goes to a local store and he sells it for $10, which I didn't do a conversion on it. I have some conversions later. Don't worry about it. After staying in this place for about 2 weeks to recover, he states that he's going to go home to Pennsylvania, where he grew up. He's sick of this, and he's leaving. So he leaves this place. He leaves the Indian Agency, and he goes to a really nearby town that's small, and he stays there for a little while. He goes into a shop in this new town, and he's going to buy provisions so that he can leave. And while shopping in one sitting, he drops close to $100. In 1874, that's $100. Today, that'll be like someone that says they're completely poor, that disappears for 2 weeks, showing up and spending around $2,400 in cash in one spot.
Wow.
Mind you, he was broke before he went to the mountain. So to test something, because the shopkeeper thinks none of this adds up, the shopkeeper asks him, hey, I'm kind of broke right now. You seem to have some money. Can I take a loan out from you? And Alfred's like, sure, what do you need? And the shop owner asks him for $300. And Alfred agrees. He's like, yeah, I can lend you that. And the shopkeeper's like, you know what, don't worry about it. I'm sure I'll be fine. But he was just kind of testing him. Alfred then goes to the saloon and starts drinking and talking shit about everyone that's there to anyone who would be willing to listen, when in walks a guy named Preston Nutter. Preston was part of the original party that decided to wait at the chief's place.
Sounds like a fake-ass name.
So he walks in, he's like, why is Alfred here? Why is he alone? Why is he talking all this shit? And how did he get so much money? Because he's buying all these drinks for himself. So something's really wrong. So he approaches Alfred. He's like, where is everyone you left with? So he tells the same, they left me story. But Nutter is not buying it, especially since he doesn't look starved. And when he hears about the rifle, he knows something's up. Because no one would give up their rifle, and certainly not to Alfred. So 5 other guys from the original party decided to leave the chief's place on the same day, but instead of going to this town, they went to the Indian Agency. When they get to the Indian Agency, the head of the agency, whose title is a general, sees them and asks them, are you the folks that got stranded back at the chief's encampment? They're like, yes. He's like, okay, so we met one of your people, and he told us this thing happened up on the mountain. And all 5 of them say, that's horseshit. No one would have given him the rifle. They wouldn't have left him either, because they're actually all really good people, despite the fact that they're greedy. They wouldn't have left him to die. So that doesn't make sense. So at this point, the general thinks, we didn't think his story makes sense. Now we have 5 people saying that he's not a good dude, and his story doesn't make sense. And we have 5 people missing. So the general sends someone to the town over to get Alfred. But he says, don't tell him he's under arrest. So the guy that gets there says, hey, we need your help. We think we know where your friends are, but we need you to take us to them. So he's really reluctant. He's like, the general insists you come with me. So he rides back to the Indian Agency. When he gets back there, he's confronted by the general, the 5 former members of his party that showed up and called him out.
Wow.
And they try to talk to him about it. He uses his BS story, but they mention that he had stayed 6 weeks at the town over before this whole thing went down, where they went and grabbed him.
Yeah.
And in that 6 weeks, he had spent well over $100 around town. And they're like, you had no money when you left. Where did you get all this money? So he tells them, I took out a loan in the town over. That's where I got the money from. So the officer that retrieved him, the one that was sent to fetch him, is like, BRB bitches, I'm gonna go check on this and see if it's legit. Because he knows something's up too. So he rides away. Comes back a few days later, is like, not only is all of that bullshit, but the shop owners and the people there say he started paying for things out of multiple wallets.
Oh,
if he ran out of money, he'd take another wallet out of his pockets and he'd pay for it with cash out of that, or coin or whatever. So he had like 4 or 5 wallets on him for some reason, and no one thought about asking him, but they're saying he didn't take out a loan, but he has a bunch of wallets for some reason. So when that comes out, he's getting really nervous. The timing on this next thing is not exactly known from what I can tell, But let's just say that right at that moment, if this is the movie version, right at that moment, 2 of the Native Americans from the Chief's place burst into the agency. They had been hunting nearby. This part is totally true, by the way. Not the timing, but this part is true. I think it's actually a few days after the fact. They burst in. They say, we need to talk to the general. The general comes out and says, what's wrong? They say, we found this while we were hunting for game. And they put down long strips of human flesh.
Gross.
That have been flayed off of someone up on the mountain. They say they found it while they were hunting on a hill nearby. At this point, Alfred sees what they brought in, and he faints. When they wake him up, which I can only imagine was with slapping, because you're not going to be gentle to someone like this at this point, they demand he tells them the truth. And he tells them that they got lost, which is pretty obvious, and that they ran out of food. And once they ran out of food, they tried to forage, and then they tried to hunt, and that failed too. And the party began, quote, eyeing each other in an unsettling way. And according to him, he left to go get some wood to burn, and when he came back, 4 of the party members were standing over Israel's dead body. Someone had hit him in the head with a hatchet and killed him.
Wow.
And as he returned and noticed this, no one was mourning him. They just started butchering his body for the meat.
That's pretty fucking gross.
They then started moving on, and within 2 days, they ran out of food again. I should mention that after they butchered this person apart, he claims they divided up his possessions and his money because he no longer had need of it. It takes them 2 days of traveling before they're out of food again, so Packer admits that him and 3 of the other companions stepped aside and stated that they think that they should kill Frank Miller, who was ironically the one that was nicknamed Butcher. They decided he should go next because he was stocky and they thought that he'd have the best meat.
That's what you want to be told.
So again, they kill him, they butcher him, and they divide his possessions. And they tried to keep going again, but ran out of food. So the story repeats. Humphrey went next, then George Noon. In all instances, these people didn't die from exposure or anything. They died from murder for food. The more that died, the longer the food lasted, according to Alfred. And there was less mouths, so there was less worry, but eventually that the food would run out. So it got down to Alfred and Shannon Bell. Alfred claims that when the food was out and they were starving, Bell tried to kill him by grabbing a rifle and trying to smash his head in with the butt of the gun, but he managed to get the better of him by hitting him in the head with that same hatchet and killing him as well. During this confession, they asked him why he wasn't gone if these things were happening and times were so hard and they were starving, and he told them that he had actually grown to like eating human meat and that the areas around the breasts were the best part.
That is gross.
That is his response. This was recorded by a clerk, by the way, when he's confessing. They demand he show them where the bodies are because they want to recover these guys off the mountain. So the 5 guys from the party that showed up in town that called him out are like, the general, you, the 5 of us, and the clerk who recorded your confession, we're going back up on the mountain and you're going to show us where the bodies are. They don't find anything while they're up there, so the OG guys accuse him of being a liar, that something else must have happened, that they do believe the horrible parts of the story, but he's clearly hiding some more, and they have to stop on the way back and sleep in the wilderness because it's taken so much time. In the night, it turns out Alfred has hidden a knife on his person and been waiting for the right moment, and he first attempts to kill the clerk that has recorded his confession while he's sleeping, but the clerk fights back and makes enough noise that all of the men restrain him, and when they get back, they toss him into jail to wait for a trial. While awaiting trial, he comes up with a completely different confession where all of the men entered into a pact together where once they died, they wanted the other persons to eat them. And in this particular story, they all die of natural causes from starvation or cold or exposure.
Quote unquote natural causes.
And then they were eaten because of that. When he realizes no one is buying this bullshit because he's already confessed to the first thing, he breaks out of jail and escapes. Because apparently the jail was like a log cabin and he wasn't really even locked up. He was just under observation. And they're saying that someone left his door unlocked and he just fucking bolts. So when August hits, because this guy's long gone, the bodies are recovered because the snow was all melted. And when they find the site, all of the bodies are together. They're not scattered as both of those stories had insisted where they kept trying to travel and people kept dying. They're all like the same camp within feet of each other. It was as if they had all been murdered and butchered, not only in one site, but in one time, like at one night. Which, BT dubs, that place is now called Dead Man's Gulch, where their bodies were discovered.
Wow.
So if you ever know where that is, because you're living out in that area, that's why it's called that. Then, in 1883, almost 10 years later, one of the members of the OG party that stayed back in the chief's place is now a shop owner in a town in that region. And some guy comes into his store to buy supplies. And the shop owner says to this guy, "Man, you look really familiar. Do we know each other?" And the guy says, "I don't think so, but my name is John Schwartz." Here's the interesting thing. The shop owner who stayed at the cheese place stayed with 9 other people, because they're all just like, it makes more sense just to stay and wait, right? One of the people that stayed was named John Schwartz. He knew John Schwartz, and the person standing in front of him, claiming to be John Schwartz, was not him.
Well,
and when he's like, this person's lying to me, who has the audacity to lie to me about who they are? And then it hits him. This is Alfred Packer.
Oh, okay.
He looks a little bit different, but sure as shit, it's him. So he sells him the stuff he needs. He leaves the shop, and this guy immediately runs to the sheriff and tells him, the cannibal of Colorado is here. And they go and find him, and he gets arrested. And he finally gets his trial, and during it, he throws out as many lies as he can about all the different reasons why all this stuff happened. But in the end, the one charge that sticks is the murder of Israel Swan, the man whose rifle he had when he showed up at the agency. So he is sentenced to death by hanging, and it gets scheduled for 6 weeks out. So Alfred has a lawyer at this time who during these 6 weeks decides, I'm going to do whatever I can to try and save Alfred's life. He winds up finding a loophole, and he goes back to court and he presents it and he says, you actually can't hold him responsible for this. And the court basically says, get fucked, we are.
Wow.
And he's like, well, I'm going to take this to the Supreme Court. So he does. And the Supreme Court reviews it, and they come back and they state, well, here's the deal. When he did this, regardless of whether or not he did it, Colorado was a territory. Colorado is now a state.
Yeah.
He's hidden for 9 years, and you tried him under the state's laws, which did not apply back when he committed the crime.
Okay.
So they're like, the trial's a mistrial. You can't kill him. So he gets a second trial. And during the second trial, the lawyer manipulates things basically so it comes out where the only thing he's guilty of is being not just a bad guide, but a guide who deliberately wanted his clientele to die. So he gets voluntary manslaughter, which is one of the weirdest charges I've ever heard of. And he is sentenced to 8 years per person who died in his care, which he fucking ate.
Wait, what?
So he gets 40 years in jail.
Oh my God.
He gets paroled after 18. And is released in 1901. He actually petitioned for his own parole like 5 times, but gets denied every time. But a reporter who knew about the legend of the Colorado cannibal goes down and starts talking to him. She's from the Denver Post. Her name is Polly Pry. The last name of Pry for a reporter is perfect, by the way. So she writes this thing in the Denver Post about how he should be released. This isn't his fault. He was taken advantage of. He's this Civil War hero, blah, 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 blah. It's a fluff piece. And so enough people read it and believe it. They start writing petitions and letters to the governor of Colorado. And every time he gets it, he's like, no, like the Colorado cannibal, like, yeah, I know what he did. Fuck that guy. He can die in jail.
Wow.
And then he gets so many that on his last day in office, after he is voted out, his last day, he includes him in his not pardons, which everyone that's leaving office does for people. He didn't pardon him. He paroled him under the condition that he was never allowed to make a dime off of his story.
Wow.
So anyone that can tell his story can do it free of royalties. So once he is paroled, he gets a job, as you have to do, as a security guard for the Denver Post. Because Polly Pry was the person who got him out of jail, and he decides he wants to protect her for the rest of his life and refers to her as, quote, his liberator.
That's so cute.
He's pretty fucked up. Yeah. He wouldn't live very long, though. He died 6 years later. The cause of death was dementia, quote, dementia - trouble and worry, which I really think means guilt. I feel like he died of guilt once he was out. Maybe just general disgust for himself, but he lived to be 65 years old before he died.
I mean, if you eat enough people, too, don't you kind of
it fucks you up
go
really
nuts?
bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume. There's something about that in one of the movies that I saw
like
where
bacteria or something in the meat. And
you'll get shakes from it too. I think that might be something specific to the movie that they made up, but either way, yes, it will fuck you up. So there's still quite a few questions about this particular story, and it's difficult because Alfred is the only witness, and so he gave so many different accounts, it's hard to pick and choose which details are accurate and which ones aren't. Some folks believe he killed them all silently while they slept, gathered up portions of their bodies to take with him, because he had already tasted human meat, and once he realized their food was going to run out, he realized he could go much further with 5 butchered corpses and rations, and make it to where he did eventually make it to. And that when he got there, he saw the place, he abandoned the last rations he had, which were the beef jerky strips or the human fruit roll-ups or whatever. And that's why they were discovered. But no one knows for sure, because he was the only person. He is the definition of an unreliable narrator. This version of the story is definitely different than the musical version. The musical version is a lot more fun, still kind of messed up, and although the beards look terrible in that movie because it is such a low budget production, they do have a song that's interrupted by someone getting shot. And I will say it's like one of the best and most realistic looking gunshots I've ever seen on film.
Wow.
And when they do the commentary, they talked about how they had a bunch of different scenes that they were going to film and they ran out of money. So you have squibs, right? To make an explosion on your body that makes it look like you got shot.
Okay.
Just like a remote triggered explosive that has like a blood pack in it.
Yeah.
And they're like, they told the guy who was setting everything up, like, just put all the squibs on the back of our friend's head. Like, instead of just putting one there, put them all on there because they couldn't film the rest of the scenes. So when he gets shot, it's this huge explosion and he looks genuinely shocked. And after they finished filming it, he was like, that hurt so goddamn bad when it went off.
Wow.
And when they're doing the commentary, they're like, but it was the best goddamn gunshot I've ever seen on film. And I agree, dude. It's so good. So that is the story of Alfred Packer. If you get a chance, go check out Cannibal the Musical by Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
I've never heard of it before, so.
And watch it with director's commentary on, because you'll get an idea of why he made that movie, because it has nothing to do with the true story. It's more of a vengeance thing for one of his exes, and it's hilarious as well. So I hope you enjoyed that topic. We're going to take a quick commercial break before we move into the riveting, inspirational tale that Robin is about to tell of the Donner Party. And we are back. I want to mention one thing before we pass it off. I said that my story also involved the Donner Party. One of the reasons why Alfred was found not guilty on a bunch of counts, and the only thing he was found guilty on for that first trial was the murder of someone, was specifically because the Donner Party had become so famous for what happened, and people had to confront the fact that if it happened to them, what would they do? That they were so sympathetic to the idea of forced cannibalism that they're like, this poor guy. And that's also part of the reason why when the petition got run, or when the story got run, people thought he didn't do anything wrong. You should let him go. And they didn't realize that he legitimately just murdered these people because he liked the taste of flesh, of human meat, when he didn't need to at all. And I just want to go ahead and put that out there. So now I will hand it off to you, Robin.
Awesome. Thank you. I am covering the Donner Party. We're going to finish Man-Eater May pretty strong with all these man-eaters, right? And how much bigger can you get than the Donner Party? I say that, but there's probably something out there that's absolutely horrific that has to do with cannibalism.
You know there is.
Yeah.
There's like some man-eater topic we didn't even think of.
I'm sure many of you have heard of the events that occurred concerning the Donner Party. There's card games out there called Donner Dinner Party. You know what I mean?
That's so fucked up.
We own it. I don't know what.
Oh my God, I didn't know we own that.
So sometimes it's called the Donner Party. Mostly, that's what you'll hear it as. Some people refer to it as the Donner Reed Party because the families that are included in the group that went. So I actually didn't know a lot about the whole thing that transpired. I didn't know a lot of the little details, and I didn't actually look too much into it until recently. And I always assumed that it was somewhere in Europe or the Himalayas or something like that. Yeah, because I didn't know anything about it. So
Alive, the movie Alive, and the real events that were based off that were the Himalayas too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's it. I won't say it's easy to get mixed up, but I totally understand it because when I was younger, I think the Alive thing was a lot more popular than the Donner Party.
Yeah.
So, all right, fill us with that wonderful knowledge, Rob.
All right, so if you didn't know anything about the Donner Party, it actually takes place here in the United States along the historical trail known as the Oregon Trail. And
The Oregon Trail has claimed many a people in my day.
It is not just a video game or a card game. It's a card game now. So the tale of the Donner Party starts in the 1840s when people were beginning to settle along the West Coast. Like Adam was saying, people were heading that way for gold, for opportunities, for jobs. A lot of people were resettling from the East Coast over to Oregon and California. And I think the gold rush was mainly in California, right?
It was a lot of places, but like California, I think, was really highlighted.
That's why the 49ers or whatever are there. Okay. So this trek in that period wasn't as easy as just how we do things now, right? We just hop on a plane, get there in a couple hours. It was a lot harder. An overland journey took ages, especially in these wagons that are made of wood, you know? It's just absolutely nuts.
I mean, we made jokes about the Oregon Trail video game, but there were parts in it where it's like, oh, you broke a wheel.
Yeah.
What do you do? You're gonna die now.
Well, all the stuff that's in the Oregon Trail, it actually happened to people. That's why it's in the game, right? But the idea of better prospects and opportunities and the idea that you could freaking go find a bunch of gold was worth it. It made this huge journey worth it for these people. A wagon going from Independence, Missouri to the Continental Divide, which is on the West Coast. If you traveled 15 miles a day, it would take anywhere between 4 to 6 months to get to the West Coast. That is a lot of time to just travel from one coast to the other, right? Then from the Continental Divide, you'd still have to choose what path you're going to take to your final destination, because you're going to go north or south or whatever. If you've looked at a topographical map of the United States, you'd be able to see that the land isn't completely flat. The U.S. is covered in a bunch of different mountain ranges.
And the Rockies are vicious, right?
The Sierra Nevada is a range that is along the route to California. It has 500 distinct mountain peaks and is over 12,000 feet high, which is high. This particular mountain range has a notoriously steep eastern slope as well. So to even get to the California side, you have to climb up this steep side of it that you're coming from.
It's not like nowadays where our roads literally cut through the mountains because people built them.
Yes.
It was like, if there wasn't a road, how would you get around it? Figure it out.
So because of having to climb over these ridiculously high mountains, it's important to take into account snow in the winter. It's vital to travel at the right times because you don't want to get caught in bad weather. In the spring of 1846, about 500 of these settlers' wagons left from Independence. At the end of this season of a whole bunch of people going all at once, right? There were 9 wagons containing 32 members of the Donner and Reed families, as well as those in their employ. So, like, all their teamsters that you were talking about. So, they're people that worked for them, that handled their horses and their cattle or their ox in the wagons and did all that stuff. They left pretty late, around May 12th of that year. So that's already heading into summer. I think that's summer, right? May is
summer starts in June 20th.
Okay. Close enough.
Still pretty late. Like, spring has already broken.
Yeah.
You should be on the road.
So these members, in the Donner Party included George Donner, which was, the patriarch, I assume. And he was 60 when they left. He had his wife, Tamsin, and 3 daughters with them. That ranged from 3 to 6. And those were their daughters between the 2 of them. And then he had children from his previous marriage. And they ranged from like 12 to, they were like teens. So they were teenage age. Then George had his brother, Jacob, who was 56, with his wife and their 7 kids that ranged from Samuel, who's like little tiny itty bitty baby at 1 year old, and up to teenage age. So they had a whole bunch of kids. And then that's just the Donners. There's their employees too. So they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 employees. So they're wagon drivers, they're animal caretakers, things like that. There's a whole lot of names, and we are already probably going to be over an hour, so I'm going to skip like all the names that really don't matter to you, the listener, because you'll never hear them ever again.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Then there's the Reed family. So there's James Reed, who is going to play an important role in things. And he's 45. He comes from Ireland. He has his wife Margaret with him. They have their children. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They have 6 children, and then they have his wife's mom that comes with them. She already is in like the late stages of consumption. So they're probably, we got to go to the West Coast. You have TB, which is tuberculosis. And back then, if you went to the West, it was like better for you, right?
Drier climates, especially,
right.
Yeah.
But she dies at the age of 70 at one of the campsites that they called Alcove Springs and buries her body along the trail that they took. The Reeds, they had their own staff, of course, and they had like four employees, and then one of them brought their sister along to be like the cook for everybody. So that's a lot of people, a surprisingly large amount of young people, and mostly people under 40, right? Most of them are under 40. Just the patriarchs are up there in age. It's a harsh trek across the country, and it's probably really painful and really dangerous for someone of people of that age. And then they have a bunch of tiny little kids too. I'm sure it's just a nightmare to try and wrangle everybody. And at the same time, it's just something that you have to do. You have no choice, right? Because they're not making it out on the East Coast, which is why they want to move that way. Within a week of leaving Independence, they meet up with another group of wagons. So 9 wagons becomes 59 wagons.
Holy shit.
By June 16th, they travel 450 miles with 200 miles left before reaching Fort Laramie, Wyoming. And there were rain delays there. There's flooding. Other families join them along the way. There's lots more young people, lots more children, and things just get kind of rough because it's a lot. It's a lot of people, a lot of freaking wagons. A new route, however, which way you guys want to say that, was promoted by someone named Lansford Hastings. So this guy says there's this new and better road out to California. It's called the Hastings Cutoff. He claimed that he was going to wait. He's going to wait at this place called Fort Bridger, and he's going to guide settlers through this new cutoff. On July 20th, most of the group decides to stick to the already established trail via Fort Hall. So they're like, we're just going to stick to the regular Oregon Trail. Fuck that. I don't want to do anything new.
Not going to risk it.
Right. A smaller group chooses to head to Fort Bridger because they want to cut off all that time. They choose a leader to kind of lead them. They wanted George Donner, who he's like the most desired choice to lead, but James Reed, definitely plays a big role in all of the group's decision making, to their detriment, unfortunately, as we all come to know. Edwin Bryant, a journalist, reached Black's Fork a week ahead of the Donner Party, and he saw the trail and was immediately concerned at the level of difficulty this trail was going to be. There's just so many women and small children in their group that he was like, there's no way you guys are going to take all those wagons on that thing. But he left letters that warned others not to take this quote-unquote shortcut. But by the time the Donner Party reaches that area on July 27th, Hastings is already gone. He's left. He's left with his group, and is going to take those people through Hastings Cutoff. And his group is like 40 wagons. So he has 40 wagons. He's taking them through. This little shortcut is supposed to cut the journey by 350 miles with water that's supposed to be easy to come by. And it's supposed to be way easier to go through. You're not supposed to come across any angry Native Americans or anything like that. It's supposed to be easy peasy. You get through, you got water, you got food, and you cut off 350 miles.
It's so ironic that they thought that, and then the people that got them killed were the people just like them. Whereas in my story, the Native Americans are the ones that saved all those people.
There's a point, though, that the Native Americans do come in to play and are like, here's food. I'll get to it. James Reed is all on board for this supposed easier trip. So no one in the group receives a warning letter. They're just like, oh, cool. Okay, we're just going to follow this path. At Fort Laramie, an old friend named James Kleiman was actually coming from California and warns them about this supposed cutoff, right? That they wouldn't make it with all those wagons. There's no way. This guy says, like, Hastings is full of crap. It's just a lie. Don't do it. On July 31st, 1846, the group leaves after resting for 4 days. They repair all their wagons as best they can, and they kind of prep for the road ahead. And they're, at this point, 11 days behind Hastings' group that had already left. Following the path of the cutoff, it's quickly found to be way more difficult than they initially thought. Because the hills or the mountains are so steep, it's hard for the wagons to keep from slipping backwards. So they keep having to lock the wheels to make it so they can keep pushing forward and not slide back. The Oregon Trail is easier to travel because it's already been traversed, it's easy to find. Whereas this Hastings cutoff, there is no really big markers that you can follow. What Hastings did was he just attached a bunch of these letters to different trees to say oh, this is the path or whatever. And then you have general directions that he wrote. So they're kind of just like, well, okay, I guess we're just going to follow these general directions. This path that they take is a bunch of canyons, a bunch of boulders. All these things have to be cleared. There's dangerous cliffs that they have to get past. And the wagons are just having the hardest time getting through. They don't have a guide, so they're kind of just guessing. And so they sit there and they have to decide, right? Are we going to keep going or are we going to turn back and go the other way? And they choose poorly. They decide we're just going to keep on going. And remember when I said if you do 15 miles a day, it'll take you 4 to 6 months.
I'm nodding yes for those of you who can't hear my nod.
Oh, okay. Their trip is slowed down to a crawl because of how difficult it is to get through this mountain, and they only travel about 1.5 miles a day.
Oh my God.
So
around 7 times longer then.
It's nuts. You can probably calculate it. I didn't calculate it. Again, it's 4 a.m. My brain can't.
Say best case scenario, you said 4 to 6 months, right?
Yeah. If you did 15 miles a day.
Yeah. So if they're doing 1.5, that's actually a tenth, come to think of it. So they're going to be going for 10 times as much. You said 4 months. So 40 months, which is almost 4 full years.
Yeah, that's just through the mountain part, though. Able-bodied individuals had to clear the pathway for the wagons. So they're cutting down trees, they're clearing rocks and bushes and things like that. And it's a lot of extra effort. That's a lot of extra calories. It's more food they're going to have to eat, more water they're going to have to drink. While the Donner Party is making their way through, the Graves family had set off to find them. And as they made their way across the, Wasatch range of the Rocky Mountains, they meet up. And so now they've added another group to their party. So the Donner Party becomes a group of 87 members spread between 60 to 80 wagons. By August 20th, so dead summer, right in the middle of summer, they'd reached the point in their journey where they could see down to the Great Salt Lake, which is located in northern Utah. It is the largest saltwater lake in the Western Hemisphere. It's about 1,700 square miles, which is absolutely gigantic if you didn't know.
Here's a big pool of water that you can't drink.
Yeah. So they left Independence on May 12th. They've already been traveling for 4 months when they get to this area where it's just the peak of the mountain. They can see down to that salt lake. They're not even at the salt lake yet. So it's understandable that discord's being sown within the party. People are starting to argue. They're starting to fight. Everyone's fucking hungry, thirsty. They're miserable. James Reed was one of those particularly blamed for their bad fortune. Food and supplies are running low for the less affluent families within the group. Around the end of August, the party finds tattered pieces of a letter from Hastings, and it indicates what lays ahead. And it says there's 2 days and nights of difficult travel. There's going to be no grass. There's going to be no water. Their oxen that they're using, like to pull the wagons and things like that, they're already so exhausted and they barely have water left as it is. There's no other choice for them but to keep going because they've already gotten that far. What else are they going to do, you know? And again, keep in mind, this is the middle of summer. It's ridiculously hot. People are starting to see mirages. They think that some people are seeing like they've already passed that Hastings group. You know what I mean? After 3 days of doing this, water's gone. Some people even went so far as to abandon a number of animals and wagons. People are just leaving them there. A number of oxen, including those owned by Reed, became kind of like crazy and desperate, and they're just like breaking out of their what are those things called? They're like breaking out of their chains and things like that to run off. So they're running off trying to find water, food, or anything. Many other animals just kind of went missing. Like there's horses that kind of went missing. But there are no human deaths, so people haven't died yet. And the supposed 2-day journey ends up taking 6 days for them to get from one end to the other. By this point, people have no more faith in this supposed shortcut, right? Reed's family takes the biggest losses. He made, biggest losses as in like food, water, all that stuff. He makes everybody else, all the families, submit an inventory of their food and supplies to him. Then it's just like this guy takes control of everybody's stuff, right? A couple of men that had gone to search for missing animals came back reporting that despite their recent reprieve in their crazy trip, they still have another huge desert that they have to get across again. So now the oxen are super duper exhausted and they're super skinny and they just have to get through it. They hate Hastings. They've no choice but to continue on because what else are they going to do? September 26th, the Donner Party rejoins the traditional trail. So they get through that Hastings cutoff, but this cutoff has already delayed them by a whole month. By October, people have kind of split up to make better time. So if they think like people are weighing them down, right, making them take longer, they leave. So it's only a couple of them. It takes them much shorter time to get to wherever it is they need to go. Fights start breaking out, and James Reed, this guy making all the decisions, kills John Snyder over an argument. Witnesses come together and they decided to banish Reed. Because they have a fight, he stabs him and kills him. The parties and families all split into different factions and start becoming kind of distrustful of each other. Food and water is scarce. People are getting vicious. People start dying. The party is inflicted with a bunch of different hardships. At this point, the party's lost about 100 oxen and cattle and is incredibly depleted of food stores. Many have lost wagons, and these people, children included, are forced to just walk. So if your wagon's down, a lot of people weren't helping others. There wasn't a lot of time to rest, too. Once they got through the next portion of desert, then they come across this lush country, finally. Anyone that comes across that after such a horrible journey would be happy, right? But it's not something that lasts because they have to keep going. Winter's coming. They need to get through the next mountain pass before the snow starts, right?
In the end, the Starks are always right.
God.
Winter is coming.
What is it? The wolves stick together or something like that?
Something about the pack survives.
The pack survives. That's what it is. So, the party has to push over the mountains, supposedly this mountain range is worse than the last that they went through. Family by family, they kind of trudge on. It's now October 20th. They started May, June, July, August, September, October. It's been 6 months. They've been traveling for way too effing long. They're told that the pass that they're traveling through wouldn't have snow until the middle of November. The Donners are the last to leave of all the families. Snow starts falling. All the families before them make it to Truckee Lake. They actually travel further, but have to turn around because snow starts falling. And Truckee Lake has places where they can actually stay. So the main families, all those other families, make it to Truckee Lake, set up camp there, except for the Donners. They're about a half day away below the rest of them. So on November 4th, they're stuck up there. More snow falls. 60 people set up at the lake for the winter. The camp has a few poorly constructed cabins. By few, I mean there's like three. 3 cabins are built there. The roofs leak. It's pretty shitty. The group consists of 19 men, 12 women, and 29 children. The adults seem to be just about outnumbered, right? 6 of those 29 children are just little tiny babies. They're small. The Donners, unfortunately, are forced to set up tents for their 21 people that they have. The snowstorm that begins lasts 8 days. People had very little food. Their livestock was dying. The bodies of the dead animals were frozen, and they just stacked them up because it's frozen, right? It's snowing. You can do that. Though the lake has not yet frozen over, fishing isn't something that is a familiar activity for them, so they can't fish for the trout or whatever it is in the lake. People are starting to kind of scalp each other for supplies. Not literally scalp each other, but like, you want this, you're going to have to pay way more than it's actually worth. So they were charging ridiculous amounts of money for like dead bodies, dead carcasses of animals. So storm after storm covers everything in snow. It kills their cattle, it kills their horses, and then these animals are just getting buried under more snow. So they're losing these things. The families trapped in the snow are absolutely miserable. There's not enough food, so they're forced to eat ox hide. So what they do is they take the hide and just boil it until it becomes gross, but like chewable, I guess. And they boil ox and horse bones multiple times for soup. And it becomes like the bones become so brittle, like if you bite into it, it just disintegrates because they've cooked it so many times. People start eating their animal rugs. There's still communication between the families and the Donners that are half day away. People try to go back and forth between the two areas to try and keep communication lines. News came that a number of members of the Donners died, including Jacob Donner. George Donner's hand is injured. At first, it's thought to be superficial, but it gets infected. And there's no doctors, right, to help them out. So there's not a lot of able-bodied men left down at their camp to work. January finds everyone facing starvation, so they've already been at this for 8 months now. The Truckee Lake group, so the group that had most of the families up there, is dying left and right now. They're desperate. Franklin Graves creates 14 pairs of snowshoes for a number of people left. On December 16th, 17 men, women, and children try to cross the mountain pass in these freaking snowshoes. So this party gets called the Forlorn Hope by a future historian named Charles McGlashan. So you heard me when I said that they made 14 shoes, right? But 17 people went. So there's people that don't have snowshoes. They quickly turn back around and go back because there's no way that they can get through. The group becomes lost and confused after days in the snow. Around the 8th day, Patrick Dolan proposes that someone should volunteer to die in order to feed the others. Some say that they should duel to figure out who they're going to eat. Then there are some that say that there should be some lottery to make to kind of choose the sacrifice. A man named William Eddy is just like, if someone dies, then they die. Not his actual words, but it's just like, if someone dies, we'll eat them. But this group kind of just goes crazy, right? There's some that refuse to eat any people, but it's just they're desperate. There are those people in the group that make jerky out of some people's organs once they die, which is gross, but you do what you do to survive, or you do what you need to survive. And people just keep continuing to die in the snow. Only 6 of that group survive, reaching a Native American settlement that gives them nuts and grass and stuff to eat. So they come and start helping them.
And they're like, why are you out here? Like, are you people crazy?
Yeah. So those 6 people are rescued on January 17th after a 33-day trek from the lake. It takes them 33 days. That's nuts. James Reed, the guy who got banished, actually made it out and to safety. He actually has concern for those left behind because his family is still left behind. So a party of about 30 horses and a dozen men go to try and help the group. They expected to find the Donner Party, but only found a pioneer couple. It's just a couple separated from their party and on the brink of starvation. That's who those people find. There were rescue parties that were created to try to help those that were still trapped in the mountain pass. So February 18th, a rescue party, that more people actually joined the rescue party, but over time it dwindles down to like 7 people left to keep going to help, right? So they scale the Fremont Pass, which is now dubbed Donner Pass. They were shouting for anyone, and a woman pops out of the snow and asks them, "Are you men from California, or do you come from heaven?" Because it's just like everybody's dying, right? They're all desperate. So this rescue team, they give out food in small portions to prevent overeating and accidental death. Because if you're starving, right, you just want to shove everything into your mouth. I mean, I still do that even when I'm not starving. I'm just hungry. So they were absolutely buried under snow. There were 13 people that were dead, scattered all over the place in the snow. Some of the rescue party went to grab whoever was left at the Donner's camp. George Donner's arm was so gangrenous at this point that he couldn't even move. The rescuers were able to bring back 4 children and 3 adults, all of which were starving. 23 people were chosen to go with this particular rescue party, leaving another 33 people behind. And even those that went with the rescuers still had bad fortune. Like, one of their cache stations, the rescuers' cache stations, had been broken into by animals, and they'd taken a whole bunch of food. So they only had like 4 days of food left in this food cache. Luckily, though, as they were heading back, they run into James Reed's rescue party. So it's just like a bunch of coincidences, but a bunch of unlucky things happen at the same time. When the rescued people get back to safety, William Hook, Jacob Donner's stepson, was so starving he just went into one of their food stores and ate until he died.
Wow.
On March 1st, a second rescue party arrives at Truckee Lake. No one dies between the first and second rescue party. But they go up there. The first 2 members of the rescue party report seeing someone carrying a human leg. This guy, once he's noticed, throws this leg into a hole in the snow that apparently housed the dismembered body of Jacob Donner. Elizabeth Donner refuses to eat, though her children are eating their father's jerky bits. Gross. 3 other bodies showed signs of having been eaten. Many of the survivors are brought to safety. Then there's a third rescue group, William Eddy and William Foster.
I had no idea there are this many groups.
Are among them, and they find that their children, it's like these people go to safety and then go back up to save the rest of their family. So they find that their children are dead, and this guy named Louis Keseberg admits to having eaten bits of William Eddy's son. Supposedly, they found this Louis guy all by himself. He had a gun, he had pots of human meat, and a bunch of the Donner's family gold. So, I don't know, this guy's super sketch. He also refuses to go with the rescuers. Only 5 people are rescued with that third rescue party. Of the 87 people that went through those mountains, only 47 survived, I think. The Donner children were all orphaned. All their parents died. Many families were absolutely decimated. The only ones that left intact, like the families were still intact, were the Reed family, that guy that got banished, his family, and then that of the Breen family. No adults over the age of 49 survived. So note to self, do not travel in snowed-in mountain passes over the age of 49. Do it while you're young.
Probably a good idea.
There are those that dispute that there were any accounts of cannibalism at all. Charles McGlashan wrote a book titled The History of the Donner Party in 1879, but in his book he kind of refuses or avoids any of the more gruesome details, so like how desperate and horrible like the kids' lives were before they died, things like that. When his book was published, Georgia Donner actually wrote him to clarify some things. So she was only 4 at the time, but claims that human flesh was only given to the youngest of the children. She also recollects that Elizabeth Donner announced one morning that she had cooked the arm of a Samuel Schumacher. Gross. It's hard though when you're 4 at the time. Who trusts, the recollections of a 4-year-old? Archaeological investigation is inconclusive for any signs of cannibalism. They can't find bones and things like that, but it's been so long, According to Eliza Farnham, Mary Donner, who was 7 at the time, is the one that suggested to other people that they needed to eat several individuals because they'd already started doing so within the Donner family. So they were already eating their relatives. There are those that say without the consumption of others that there's no way so many of them would have survived, because there would have been times where it's like over a week they'd be without food, so they wouldn't have been able to survive without eating something or someone. Patrick Bremen, one of the travelers, actually kept a diary of their experiences. So over time, he started just write super brief stuff about the weather or what the weather was like. Then he would note how much more desperate people were getting and describing their desperation, which is absolutely terrifying. There is a Donner Memorial in a state park in California that has a 22-foot tall pedestal. And this pedestal is supposed to represent how deep the snow was that winter.
Wow, that is crazy.
Yeah. It's absolutely nuts, this whole thing. I can't believe they had to live through that. There's obviously a lot more details when it comes to the Donner Party, and I wish I could go into all of it, but it's a lot of stuff. So yeah, people eating people. It's definitely man-eater. Man-eaters. But you gotta do what you gotta do, especially in a situation like that. It's just terrifying.
It's pretty horrific. I had no idea there were that many people that were a part of the Donner Party, or that the death tally was so high.
Yeah.
So, morbidly interesting, but still very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So, good work. I think we tag team Man-Eater May's finale pretty well here. Hopefully you folks enjoyed episode 180, the Man-Eater May conclusion episode, or whatever we're going to name it. If you have a story, it doesn't have to be necessarily about cannibalism. I mean, if you have it, I don't think we need that, actually, come to think of it.
Please don't tell us you eat people.
We don't want to hear that. Army Hammer, stop tweeting at me. Anyways, you can email storytime@scaryish.com if you have a story that's supernatural, paranormal, spiritual, coincidental, true crime, or extraterrestrial in nature. You can also go to our website, scaryish.com, and click on Contact Us. Fill out that form. It comes directly to us. If you go to facebook.com/scaryish podcast, you can message us that way, or you can tweet at us @scaryish_pod, or hit us up on Instagram with @scaryish_podcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/scaryish podcast. And those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1, and at $1 you get ad-free episodes, which is awesome. There's also physical merch tiers and things like that. If you're not into the whole monthly subscription type thing, you can go to our coffee, ko-fi.com/scaryish podcast. All your donations go to helping us upgrade our studio setup and kind of keep us motivated, keep us going, keep us investing in ourselves.
Keep us creeping on.
Oh, yeah. Also, wait, is that all I do? That's it.
Right on. That's everything we have for episode 180, the super long, super crazy, super sleepy, super fun episodes. We hope you all enjoyed it.
It's almost 6 a.m.
Yes, and I need to edit this episode still, so thank you so much for listening. Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.